fair to say that the discussion focused in no small part on what would happen to individual players if the scenario of their proposal was adopted. Beyond that, we have a number of information requests in process that we'll be expecting to get a bunch of further information on. We have a meeting again tomorrow morning in which we're going to go back to the core economics, and then next week we'll be in Toronto.
Was it ever discussed, just in light of the Weber's offer sheet, Fehr's monster contract? Were they ever, I guess, inclined to explain how they can give out such contracts, sort of the incongruence of what they're asking for?
I will tell you this: that was a subject which came up briefly today, not at length. I've always viewed that, as long as there's no collusion or anything involved, that taking into account the system, the contract sort of speaks for itself in terms of what people should be doing. You'll have to ask them why they want to modify the system to prevent that kind of choice. I'll let them speak for themselves.
Well, when you say the contract speaks for itself, what do you hear when it speaks? What do you think it says?
Basically, when you see an offer sheet like that, I think that it represents how the player and the club feel about what an appropriate contractual relationship is. And that includes length, it includes dollars, it includes payment terms, and sort of all the rest of it.
I mean, you mentioned the word collusion.
No, I said it. I said assuming that the contracts speak for themselves, assuming you're in a collusion-free environment.
But I guess you've got people at the table trying to get a new deal that would make a lot of the terms of these contracts being signed untenable.
Well, at least going forward they would, yeah. You'll have to ask them about that.
When you talk about what their proposal would be for individual players, can you expand on what you mean by that?
Sure. If you have something that says we're going to change the entry-level system, we're going to change salary arbitration, we're going to modify this, we're going to change that, you can identify individual players and say, in the old system, this might have happened. In the new system you propose, something else might have happened. In some other system, we can envision a third thing might have happened. And what you're engaged in, if you represent players, is sort of two things. You want to know sort of what the aggregate produces, but you also want to know how it affects individual players.
So it's more feasible to talk about individual players than the aggregate, or were you doing it?
No, I don't want to say more feasible. What I mean is you can't avoid either one. You have to do both. Right?
Was that the nature of what you were talking about when...
I don't want to characterize the discussions before, but no. The answer is not when that brief notion of the other came up, no.
What did they give as the rationale for wanting any type of salary rollback or modifying?
I'm not going to talk about that at this point. We're still in the process of getting the information and having those discussions.
Is it fair to say today's meeting was, again, mainly informational, sort of like yesterday?
To a significant extent, but there was a fair amount of discussion about if we do this or do that or do the other thing, what does it mean? How does it affect the teams? How does it affect the players? Is it a good idea or a bad idea?
Are you close at all, or is it possible in your meetings in Toronto next week, Don, that you would submit either a counter proposal or your own?
That depends on a lot of things that I'm not prepared to talk about yet. We'll have to see next week. Don't know yet.
A lot of people, when they saw the news of the Weber deal, hypocritical was an adjective that got tossed around.
I'm sorry, what was?
Hypocritical was an adjective that...
By whom?
On the part of the owners.
No, who was tossing it around?
That was just the general public.
Okay, I'll take your word for it. Go ahead.
Yeah, I mean, can you see why people might think that?
I'm not going to comment on that. All I've said before is that, contracts speak for themselves. Parise and Suter spoke for themselves. Any other contracts speak for themselves as to what people think is a fair contract given the system they're in.
Suggests a healthy system, I guess?
I'm not going to comment on it beyond that. Okay?
Did Leopold talk about that at all?
I'm not going to talk about individual discussions. You want to ask him, ask him. Okay?
Thank you.
Thanks, guys.
Thank you.